Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of LOCS4Africa, I'd like to welcome you to today's session. LOCS4Africa is a global network of local and regional governments committed to sustainable urban development. We influence sustainability policy and drive local action for low-emission, nature-based solutions, equitable, resilient, and circular development. Today's session is made possible by the Urban Natural Assets for Africa program, as well as LOCS4Africa and SwedeBio. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to the facilitator for today's session, Jessie Apavu. Jessie is C40 Cities Finance Facilities Regional Engagement Manager for Africa. Welcome, Jessie, and I give you the floor.
Thank you so much, Kate. Good afternoon, all delegates and guests, and all protocols observed. Warm welcome to everyone to today's session of Local Climate Solutions for Africa Congress. This session is entitled Jobs for Climate, a Critical Component of Resilience. As Kate mentioned, my name is Jessie Apavu. I'm the Regional Engagement Manager at the C40 Cities Finance Facility, which is a project preparation facility that supports cities to package their climate actions into investment-ready projects. I will be your host today. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so that you know how to engage and participate in today's session. As you can see, you have been automatically muted. However, you will have the opportunity to submit questions to today's presenters by typing your questions into the questions pane found in your control box. Please take a minute to locate where that is. You may send in your questions at any time during the session. We will address as many as possible of them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. We encourage active participation throughout the session, so please post your questions at any time, but just make sure that it is directed to the relevant speaker so that we know from our side who to address your questions to. The questions will be We'll be presenting the queries during the roundtable or the panel session at the end of the presentations today. We also want to inform you that the session is being recorded and that the recording file will be shared on the LOCS website and the Congress platform after the session. In terms of interpretation for today's session, it is available in English, Portuguese, and French. Please choose the language channels you prefer in the control box to the right of your screen. Please take a moment to locate where that is. For example, if you want to listen to the English version, please select the English channel. If you select off, you will hear the original language in which the speaker is talking. And all presentations will be delivered in English today. In terms of the agenda for today's session, climate resilience and economic growth are inextricably linked. The positive externalities and the co-benefits of building climate resilience are often overlooked. Climate actions can generate thousands of jobs while delivering on increased resilience to future climate shocks and stresses, while driving local economic growth. We are here today to talk about the benefits of climate resilience in relation to jobs and livelihoods creation. Today's session will look at how governments and the private sector work together to ensure that communities and the next generation engage in productive livelihoods in order to close the poverty gap and prevent civil unrest whilst delivering on ambitious climate actions. Our agenda for today will include 5 presentations and a roundtable discussion. The session will end with a show reel of 5 case studies that showcase examples of how small businesses play an important role in job creation. Before starting with a video and the presentations, I would like to introduce you to our speakers for today, and I would really like to seize this opportunity to thank them for being here with us today and for sharing their insights. I will introduce all of our speakers before we dive into the video and then the presentations. So our first speaker today is Teddy Mugabo. Teddy is the CEO of the Rwandan Green Fund, also known as FUNEWA. She has used this position and her prior one as head of business development to coordinate efforts in mobilizing resources towards Rwanda's green ambition. Our second speaker is Jean Verbeek. Jean is the head of research and innovation at the Global Covenant of Mayors, which he began in the mid-2020 after years of experience as a political advisor on local, federal, and European level, with a focus on sustainable cities, urban planning, social affairs, and stakeholder management. Our third speaker today is Salim Fakir, the Executive Director of the newly founded African Climate Foundation, ACF. Prior to establishing the ACF, Salim served as the head of the Policy and Futures Unit of WWF South Africa for 11 years and has worked as a senior lecturer at Stellenbosch University and as director of the World Conservation Union South Africa. Our fourth speaker is Carl Benedict. Carl is the Regional Deputy Director for the Agence Française de Développement, AFD, in Johannesburg, and he's in charge of operational activities in South Africa. This follows 6 years as a Climate and Energy Senior Project Officer and 4 years as AFD Deputy Director in Colombia. It is my pleasure to introduce our final speaker for today, who is Jeff Tooley. Jeff is a manager of the Catchment Management Section for eThekwini Municipality in South Africa. eThekwini is also Durban, for those who are not familiar with it. He's responsible for work relating to the rivers in eThekwini, including floodlines, stormwater management plans, master drainage plans, rainfall distribution figures, and erosion control, as well as adaptation plans relating to flooding. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today and being part of this really exciting session. We will now view a short video about a composting initiative in Longway in Malawi. The video will provide insights about how innovations can drive sustainability at the local level and about the enabling environment that makes such initiatives possible. Whilst the video is playing, please feel free to pop your question in the Q&A box, and someone from the team will be answering those questions. Kate, I will hand it over back to you.
So the Longway Compost Initiative is part of the broader Urban Natural Assets for Africa program, which has been partnering with the Longway City Council to help them restore their natural assets in that city. So particularly the Longway River, which is the main source of water in the city. So the city identified one area as problematic in terms of being very, very high in terms of waste and waste dumping. So it was a high points part for waste dumping, and they wanted to try and create an initiative where they collected the organic waste in the river, because about 72% of the organic waste is organic, and they wanted to be able to use that to generate a compost initiative, working with the local community in that area to capacity build them around waste and for them to start to see waste differently and use waste for opportunities. And one of those is to use it to generate compost, which then would be sold to create a livelihood and a sustainable livelihood practice, but also used on that community's permaculture. So a lot of the community was doing sustainable agriculture and then selling that crop. And so they also wanted them to be able to use the manure and the compost on their crop, which would then also be able to help them sell those produce at a higher rate and then generate more income. So there's so many benefits in terms of how the compost initiative is having impact at the community level. I think one of the main ones is that the women are starting to be able to use that compost on their own crop, and all of them have come back to us and said that they're able to sell their sustainable crops for a higher rate. So for example, their tomatoes are looking better, and so they can get a better rate for them. They've also expressed interest that they are able to use that money to now buy things that they never used to have. So one woman has actually created enough money that she's able to buy a cell phone. And this is quite important because there are quite nuanced cultural challenges and opportunities in Malawi, and often these women are reliant on their men for their income and their livelihood generation. So this project's really capacitated women to be able to generate a livelihood for themselves, which we're starting to see in things like buying a cell phone for themselves and all the rest of it, which has been quite exciting. And another great co-benefit of the project is that we've actively been able to clean up a section of the Longway River, which is so important for that city. But by taking that organic waste and the women turning that into a livelihood opportunity, such as compost, we've really started to see that river become cleaner in that little section, which is also quite a nice co-benefit. I think it's contributed to the SDGs in multiple ways. The first one is that it's definitely been around inclusivity, so leaving no one behind. The city council really struggled a little bit in the beginning to work with their informal sector. So this community shouldn't actually be there on a land use map. It's an informal area that's just sprung up. And they didn't know if they should relocate them or the rest of it. But through this project, they've acknowledged that this community is a very, very important part of their city, and it's not going anywhere, it's there. And so through this project, they've been able to work with them and create these long-lasting, sustainable relationships with this community, which I think has been great for them to overcome that and start to really build towards an inclusive city. So that's the one SDG. Of course, the other SDGs are around sustainable cities, so improving the natural asset base, or sustainable development goal around land management. But I'd probably say poverty reduction is one key one, because they've really been able to capacitate their local communities to generate a livelihood themselves, and also not have to rely on the city to collect that waste in that area. The communities almost generated their own little system of waste management, because they're using that organic waste and are now actively managing their own waste at their own little local scale. One of the key participants or stakeholders is definitely obviously the community. So the city wanted to have this waste initiative, this livelihood initiative at a local scale, and they had their various ideas. But when they went in and started to engage with that community, they realized that there's so much local knowledge at the community level, and how important it was to hear that voice and make that space for that voice. So I think community was a key stakeholder. Of course, the city officials, it is a city land. So as I mentioned earlier, it is an informal community that has sprung up. So the land is owned by the city. So any kind of structures or any initiatives that need to happen at that site need to be approved by the city. So the local government was absolutely critical in that. But an interesting dynamic at the community level was this program aimed to work with women, because we wanted to have gender equality and all the rest of it. But what we realized is, because of the cultural the kind of norms at the community level, the men also wanted to be involved in the project, and they also were kind of pushing back a little bit that their wives were so actively involved. And so we realized that the men were also so important to work with to create this enabled environment for the women to thrive. And so I think that was an interesting of who needs to be involved. It was men as well as women, even though it was seen as a more of a gender equality or gender woman kind of initiative. I think one of the most valuable ways in communicating it is the return on investment. So what I mean by that is, communities at a local level want to see benefits straight away. So they want to see that they are getting something from this initiative. So the moment they started to generate this income from selling their compost or from putting it on their own crops and then selling their crops for a higher amount, they could see that return on investment. They could see that this was a viable option, and they were very actively engaged. In other sites, we kind of like piloting these other sites, and things took a lot longer, and we lost the participation because they couldn't see that return on investment very, very quickly. So I think it comes out like one of the main key things is people need to see the value for themselves in what they're doing. And if that value is a long-term value, it's sometimes hard to keep people engaged. So it's kind of hard to answer, because this particular initiative has been part of a broader program, the Urban Natural Assets program. And what was so key in that is that we spent almost the first 2 years of the program as building like very, very strong relationships and partnerships between ICLI, Africa, but also between the city council and then between the community. And I think partnerships are absolutely key, and those relationships and that trust is very, very key. I've already mentioned a few challenges we had, this gender roles issue came up, informality, all the rest of it. And those things were much easier to overcome because the relationships were there and the relationships were formed. So I think an enabled environment is definitely putting enough time and energy in building effective partnerships, effective relationships. And that really is kind of important for sustainable work.
Thank you to the ICLA team for this inspiring video, and also to just demonstrate how transformative climate actions can be. Before I hand over to our first speaker, I'd just like to remind everyone, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat box and make sure you direct them to the correct speaker. It is now with great pleasure that I will hand over to Teddy Mugabo from FONERA. So over to you, Teddy. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be participating in this conference. It's not a presentation. I'll just pretty much go through, address the comments and the questions that were addressed particularly to the fund. And I believe this was around basically how are we ensuring that within the policies first, as well as the projects that we're supporting as a Rwanda Green Fund, ensure that there's participation of the local communities. And so before I begin, I first want to give you an overview or give you at least an introduction of the Rwanda Green Fund. So FONERA is the Rwanda Green Fund, and our main mandate is to mobilize climate change funds as well as environment funds to ensure that we are implementing our green growth and climate resilience strategy. And so at the policy level, Rwanda has adopted a green growth and climate resilience strategy, which goes up to 2050. And within this strategy, we have identified 14 programs of action, and these cut across sectors, and really looking at the different development sectors, be it agriculture, infrastructure, and water resource management. How are we making sure that as a country, we're developing in a climate compatible way? And so from this green growth and climate resilience strategy, we come down to what we call the NST. This is the National Strategy for Transformation. This is a 5-year plan which the government puts in place, and basically to guide the different sectors in terms of, but really highlighting the key challenges of the nation, but also coming up with key, strategic actions to address those. So, and then under that, each sector develops a sector strategic plan, which is also a 5-year plan. And through this, every sector has to make sure that whatever has been prioritized within the 5-year government strategy is ensured. So, and then underneath this, again, there's another layer where we have district development strategies. So the reason why I want to give you an understanding of all these, the different layers, is again to really touch on how do we make sure that the local communities are involved at even during this policy formulation. So the district development strategies, this is whereby we have the strategies which basically set out looking at the different factors, different challenges that the districts are facing. They come up with strategies. And here, particularly for FONERA, the fund, the Rwanda Green Fund, we've actually supported the Ministry of Local Government, whereby we ensure that as these district development plans are being developed, we have to make sure that they're being developed with consideration of the climate lens perspective. So we've been able to at least work closely together with the district mayors as well as the planners to ensure that these are developed considering the climate resilient angle. And from here now is where we basically, I wanted to also give you a description of how they're developed. And this is something that is developed in consultations with several stakeholders. So at the district level, obviously, you have the representation of the private sector, you have the representation of the local communities. So here, again, really the emphasis is to make sure that as these strategies are being developed, we have to make sure that the local communities are also part of this process, because we believe that they're the ones who know what the challenges they're facing, particularly in terms of the different impacts that climate change is affecting them. So they're part of this process. So now that was the policy level. I also wanted to go down to the project level, and specifically this looks at FONERA as a fund. So we have calls for proposals whereby FONERA can be accessed by government institutions, private sector, as well as NGOs, as well as cooperatives. And these cooperatives, this is where basically you have different local communities who put themselves together, put their efforts together to come up with, be it a business idea or a project. And so here, how we ensure again that the local communities are involved is from the beginning of the project design. So we really have a strong, if I can say, it's one of the criteria for the projects to be supported, for the projects to be funded. One of the eligibility criteria is really, we go down to look at the process of the stakeholder consultation. And again here, because even if a project is being spearheaded by a government institution or private sector, at the end of the day, most of the projects that we fund are looking at around improving livelihoods, at the local level, building climate resilience of these communities. So we ensure that when the projects are being developed, the communities, the beneficiaries, are actually part of the design, in that they are the ones who are clearly articulating the challenges they're facing in terms of, be it, so for example, if I can take an example in agriculture, we've had several projects whereby we have in Rwanda, a big percentage of the population, about 80% of the population relies on subsistence farming, for example. So here we're seeing a huge impact of climate change on several livelihoods in the local community. So here, they are the ones who are at the forefront of identifying their challenges, as well as proposing different solutions which can help them to cope to these effects. So again, here, that's why I wanted to really emphasize on the role of stakeholder engagement, but also particularly the local communities being part of the process that identifies the challenge, but also the solutions, because at the end of the day, we've come to realize that the local communities, even though they face the challenges, but sometimes they do, most of the time actually, they also come up with solutions. And then you find that the gaps might be access to finance, where we come in, or maybe access to some technical assistance whereby they require certain technology that they don't have the technical skills for or to develop. So this is where the fund comes in to ensure that we're providing the resources necessary, as well as to make sure that the overall impact is ensured. And just to give you in terms of numbers, as a result of the project, so we've been able to support 37 projects in the past 7 years, and this is within these projects, we've been able to create over 144,000 jobs. So this shows you that it's very important that, yes, we have to build resilience in terms of, resilience of our livelihood, of the different rural communities against climate change. But there's also opportunities in climate finance. When we talk about these projects, some of them, of course, yes, they're addressing the challenge, but there are also opportunities such as creating green jobs. And so this has been something that as a lesson learned, really, it's been amazing to see the impact that the projects we're funding are having on these livelihoods. Something else we have at the fund is obviously we have to have the right tools. So we now have an environmental and social safeguard tool, as well as a gender monitoring tool, to make sure that even when these projects when we're reviewing or appraising the projects that we fund, we have to make sure that they're also, all these issues are considered. I have 1 minute left. There was another question where that was addressed to FONERA, specifically asking about how we are, how basically the different SMEs are being catered for. So currently at FONERA, we are developing a private sector facility, but particularly if I can, maybe something to address on that is that we're developing an incubator and accelerator program, which really the purpose is to provide technical assistance as well as business development services to young entrepreneurs and people who might have amazing ideas, but really need to be accompanied to make sure that they come up with bankable projects. Because what we've seen is that currently it's very hard for a startup, for example, or a local community, a cooperative, to develop a project, because you find that there's technical assistance challenges. Sometimes they don't have the business development aspect of things. So this is where the fund again comes in. We want to make sure that we create an incubator and accelerator program to provide these services so that we can encourage even small, small, medium SMEs to be able to access these funds. So I believe that is all. I went a little bit over time, but thank you so much again. And I look forward to answering any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teddy. Thanks for sharing your insights about the different ways of working for FNAWA, and also just to emphasize the point that you made around climate actions also do present opportunities for the creation of livelihoods and jobs. And I'm sure everyone is as impressed as I am to hear that over the last 7 years, FNAWA has created over 144,000 jobs. If you have any questions for Teddy, please pop them in the chat box. It is now over to Jean Verbeek, who is the Head of Research and Innovation at the Global Covenant of Mayors. Jean, over to you.
Thank you, Jessie, and good afternoon also on my behalf. I'm quickly going to share my screen. There you go. So thanks for the invitation. I think it's really an honor to speak to you from the Global Covenant of Mayors. And let me first start just with a story, because I was listening to Jessica in the video, but also to Terry. And what struck me was what comes back often is this idea of partnerships, of community, but also the fact that we're living in a world at the moment in which a lot of challenges are coming together. This is the moment where we all look at each other during COVID, what is going to happen during the green recovery, when we build back better. And I think there the aspect of community and storytelling, but also how do we address the needs that are there and that are, as was also introduced by Jessica, are really interlinked and interdependent. And the story I want to start with is that even before COVID, and you see a picture from our Instagram account, that for me, it's really important to see what are we doing, who are we doing it for, how are we going to do it? And I think there the idea of partnerships is really crucial, but also to listen to people, to see what are daily needs. And that's also something that came up in the video, is that people want to see what the actions that we are planning, the actions that we are taking, what do they lead to, or how can they be made more tangible? And I think here you see that in different parts of the world, the first effects of climate change are already starting to pop up, with the, in lots of countries, flooding, heat island effects, mobility, housing due to growing cities. And I think there it's important to see what are the clear questions that we can really tap into. And when I was preparing for this session, I think it's easy to come up with a set of good examples and to say these are things that can work and that will drive you forward. But I think at the Global Covenant of Mayors, we also try to take another approach. And that's what I want to just also talk you through in the next couple of minutes. So the Global Covenant of Mayors is an international alliance of cities that are working together to achieve a climate resilient future, but are also working with local, regional, national governments, but also with a lot of regional and national partners. It can be city networks, the regional covenants, to really see what are the needs for every specific region. And I think there as a global convening platform, it's our role to see what are the elements, what are the challenges that come together out of every region, and what can we provide as tools, as insights, as solutions to really help out regions, but with solutions that are clearly connected to the demand. And the whole story started in 2018 with the Cities and Science Conference in Edmonton in Canada, to try and gather what are the specific demands that we need further research and innovation for, and how can they be clustered. And I'm not going to go too much in detail, and I want to come back after there are a number of schedules to what is the question at stake for Africa today. But you see a lot of things coming back also in other regions in the world. And they're linked to, as you can see, informality, urban planning and design, built and blue-green infrastructure, sustainable production and consumption, finance, uncertainty, and probably some others. And you might say, well, there's not something new in there. But I think what we have been trying to do the last couple of years, because we felt like how can we really touch all the work that's going on in cities, in communities, how can we better connect? Because lots of solutions, lots of answers already exist. How can we better see what is happening in one region? And can we translate, taking into account the DNA and the history of a specific community, that a solution that is being provided in one region in the world can also happen, for example, in Africa. And there the systems approach is really important, and especially in times of COVID, to see all the elements that are now at stake, whether it's housing, whether it's transport, whether it's energy, they all come together. And I think there's also the key in embracing this complexity and to see what are the choices we make from this holistic point of view to really move forward and to come up with tangible examples to then see how do they have co-benefits in other aspects. And that is how we designed the Innovate for Cities model, where we really focus on partnerships, where we bring together academia, governments, private sector, and cities to really come up with a city research agenda and to see what is the knowledge we have at the moment, what is the specific question for your city, for your community, for your region, what is the role of the government, what is the role of the private actor. And I think, as said, as lots of cities in Africa are still growing at an exponential pace, there's really a key, not only linked to innovative solutions, but also to knowledge, to new jobs, to new insights, to new planning, to new partnerships, to see how can we build these cities for the next couple of decades, really immediately in a more sustainable and a more resilient fashion, that all these different challenges really come together, but that we also train the future labor workforce to see what is the knowledge, what is the experience, what are the skills they need, or how can they be retrained to start working on these different challenges. And the last year, we have gone a bit deeper, going from a more global to a regional level to see for Africa, what are some current actions that are listed in the different climate action, mitigation and adaptation strategies. And there you can see that a lot of commitments are being made by the strategies, and also quite some interventions are already taking place. And important for us was to find out if we say innovative, what is it? Is it just a new idea? Is it a new approach? Is it a new partnership? Is it another strategy? And that for us was good to see if we took an insight into all those different strategies to see what are the key words that are connected to innovation. And there we could see that new evidence, new knowledge, new skills and attitudes really popped up as the #1 finding, but also to see what are solutions and adaptive capacity that needs to be augmented. We also saw that new technologies, new zero carbon buildings, waste recycling, infrastructure, nature-based solutions come up as areas where we should pursue further research and innovation, but also look for these new jobs, for these new partnerships to see where public and private sector can come together. Now, looking at the target emission sectors and also at the different themes, energy is clearly highlighted, but also governance and planning. It's interesting to see, talking about green recoveries, to see how we can tackle energy systems. Can we go to more decentralized systems? What is the role of digital enablers to help more decentralized energy systems that can be, for example, set up and governed by local communities? And I think in this combination, the key is to be found also for the future, to really see how can all these elements be brought together. And that is something we have done within the Covenant of Mayors by really making this climate action journey visible and tangible, to say, how do you go to your climate solutions by starting with the commitment, by then assessing risk, setting targets, going towards implementation and validation. But for every phase, also seeing what are the needs and what are the needs by region. And I think based on this research of the strategies, we can better frame the question and therefore also come up with better solutions that are really tailor-made. And I think what we see now is that in the first phases, lots of tools can be helpful, lots of policy recommendations to set the right frameworks. But when it comes to interventions, to implementations, I think they're the role of new jobs, of connecting the challenges, learning from each other, but based on a really clear, focused challenge. There, the Global Covenant of Mayors can help to really disseminate, come up with examples, but to bring also the communities, the partnerships, and come up with a language that really fits both the question and the solution. So happy to, in the years to come, learn more from the specific challenges and to see how we can further refine the research we've started to then better understand the question and, as said, come up with better solutions. Thank you for listening and looking forward to the rest of the stories.
Thank you so much, John, for sharing your insights from the research that you're doing with the Global Covenant of Mayors around Innovate for Cities, and also in terms of developing an agenda for climate compatible and future-proof cities. I really like the point around cross-pollination of ideas between regions, because if we really want to fast-track climate action, it comes through fast-track research and fast-tracked knowledge as well. So thank you so much for sharing this with us. It is now my pleasure to hand over to Salim Fakir, who is the Executive Director at the African Climate Foundation, ACF. So Salim, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And it's wonderful to be with this great panel that you've put together. I just want to say that also it's a privilege for me as the Executive Director of a very new foundation. It literally started the 1st of April in the midst of COVID to set up something which is essentially a re-granting foundation for private philanthropies that are globally based. So we operate across Africa, or will be operating across Africa, but our strongest program for now is in South Africa. Urbanization is certainly one of the areas we're looking to develop a strong foothold in as we develop our Africa strategy. But let me say a few words. First, I want to say that as a foundation, we enter the climate space pretty much from a development point of view. So we talk about, in our narrative, we talk about a climate development nexus. And the reason for that is that we recognize that the climate space or climate activities and investments in the climate space have to talk to the developmental agenda of the African continent, and much more so now than ever before, given the COVID crisis and the importance of recovery plans across the continent, given what the pandemic crisis has exacted on many of the African economies that were effectively, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, in the last 10 years showed very promising growth rates and very promising development trajectories, both within cities and outside of cities. When we talk about the climate development nexus, we build it around what we call a rights-based approach and capabilities approach. And effectively, we are looking at the protection of individual citizen rights and the ability of citizens to be able to grow their capacities to participate effectively in economic opportunities and other developmental opportunities, which are furthered in collaboration between government, private sector, and civic organizations. So this is fundamental in our philosophy and underpins all our climate and development work. When we talk about the opportunities for small enterprises, etc., I think it's fundamental that strategically we have to increasingly move away from the discussion, especially as it gravitates in the arena of cities and metros, from a compliance mode discussion towards literally about a focus on increased investment flows. And the reason for that is that we have to recognize that, particularly in Africa, the urban space is fundamental in the next 20 years. Most of the fastest growing cities in the world are going to be in Africa. Some of the bigger megapolises are definitely going to be in Africa. So the metros and the cities are going to play certainly centers for economic growth. They will drive the future economies of Africa. The advantage of cities are that they provide economies of scale. They often have the best talent. They have some of the best scaled network infrastructure. They have a congregation of pools of expertise and knowledge, whether it's in university, in government, or in private firms. And they often attract the largest sources of foreign direct investment, which is important for expanding jobs, particularly job intensity, and especially manufacturing. The current challenge we have in Africa is that we have a big divide between the primary sectors and the tertiary sectors. In this case, a very big gap is obviously manufacturing and industrial development. But we have the two extremes where we have significant commodity exports, and on the other side we have growing services sector, whether it's finance, retail, health, education, etc. But this middle ground, which is the manufacturing component and the development of that, requires much more investment, particularly in new infrastructure and industrial capability. So when we look at the climate agenda, largely on the way climate is perceived on the African continent is often seen as a security, migration, and adaptation issue. It's often just about poverty and disaster, and not an opportunity for Africa to be able to play a more significant role in emission reductions and investment in strategic infrastructure, particularly leapfrogging new technologies that are essential for the continent. And clearly the energy space is important. I think on the emission side, it's a false assumption to say that Africa has no high emission. These emissions will grow. And in fact, in the next 20, 30 years, Africa's emissions profile will start to look like that of China or India, certainly in the next 3 decades. So we have an opportunity to, if you want, bend the curve, to shift it away from the kind of emissions profile that we see in India and China, if we try to grow the right sorts of investments that talk to these notions of climate investments. They can also be new sources of growth, development, and certainly diversification of the African economy. On the adaptation side, I think we need to narrow that and make it more concrete around key economic sectors like agriculture, mining. In agriculture, there's a building resilience and adaptability of the key parts of the agricultural value chain. This is especially true for millions of small farmers, which need to not only protect their livelihoods, but also income. And then the other areas around the protection of key infrastructure, especially in coastal cities, which are subject to extreme weather patterns. There are lots of areas where we can optimize the investments. Certainly energy, water, building resilient waste management systems, public works programs that are important in the African continent, and setting very good building standards and better organization of the transport sector. Increase investments in these areas, particularly in cities, tends to catalyze SMMEs because of multiplier effects. But I do think that in some areas, we must distinguish between SMMEs that flow out of the multiplier effects to SMMEs that are strategic for innovation and the growth of new types of technologies and innovation in that areas. That's a very different kind of SMME. You require special ecosystems to enable that, and you need certain kinds of investments and support from government and business and universities to make that happen. So let me end there. My last message is really to say, let's not think of cities as if they are needing to comply with certain types of environmental rules and standards, but to be more around how we can increase investment and make cities the home of these new investments. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Salim. Thanks for sharing your insights about SEF's work and the underpinning principles guiding that work. And also I really like the fact how you've painted cities as the engine of growth and providing economy of scale and the pool of expertise, and being what attracts foreign direct investment and what can potentially grow different sectors. So thank you so much for that. Just to remind everyone, please keep on sending your questions through the Q&A box. It is now with great pleasure that I will hand it over to our fourth speaker, Carl Benedict, who's the Regional Deputy Director for the Agence Française de Développement, so the French Development Agency. Carl, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jessie. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for this invitation. It's a great pleasure to have this engagement with you, with the panelists and the audience. I will just quickly share my presentation. Yes, coming in. So AFD is the French Development Bank, and I'm very glad to be able to share with you some points this afternoon, since our corporate strategy has two main, I would say, highlights. One is to be 100% aligned with the Paris Agreement on climate change, and the second one is to be 100% aligned with, I would say, social cohesion objective. So I would like, just before I enter into the question, to get a step back or a step upstream when we talk about climate change and its impact. I think we all agree that we have to distinguish physical impact and transition risks. But just to highlight two things that are related to the question of climate change response or adaptation needs of adaptation-driven response, creating economic development opportunities and job opportunities. First, on physical impact, we have seen, and I'm talking from South Africa, where I'm currently based, we have seen the South African adaptation strategy just being approved last August, that there is a need to develop a consistent and harmonized vulnerability assessment methodology. In many countries, and including South Africa, we have vulnerability assessment conducted, but it's quite difficult to consolidate them and to have, I would say, yes, a consolidated view and analysis of the vulnerability, be it in economic asset, infrastructure asset, or livelihood asset, to be able to design a proper, I would say, response that will address the need to reduce this vulnerability that can hamper socio-economic development and jobs. And the other thing I wanted to mention regarding transition risks being the risk, for instance, for a specific economy of low emission transition of the global economy. And in this regard, we have supported the Climate Policy Initiative CPI study in 2019 in South Africa to assess the risk for the South African economy of the global transition away from coal being high economic assets in South Africa. And interestingly, the study underlined the economic cost at a microeconomic level. In net present value, $120 billion from 2013 to 2035 for the South African economy, which is quite huge. But what I retain from this study is the risk of I would say, inconsistent economic incentive to continue to invest in future stranded assets. And with with a false, I would say, hope of developing short-term jobs, but that won't be sustainable on the long run. And I will come back to that in one example. So that being said, I would like to move to the question of the role for DFIs and development finance institution, or development partners, if you wish. In two main areas. The first one, protecting businesses and accelerating recovery. So this is more a response to a shock, indeed. And lastly, I will give some example of when we work on adapting or preserving climate change, what does it entail in terms of opportunities for local entrepreneurship and job creation. So first, in the first pillar, protecting businesses and accelerating recovery, there have been, more and more initiatives for insurance, new or innovative insurance schemes in agriculture or in cities. In cities, there is, for instance, the recent initiative in Philippines, the City Disaster Insurance Pool, supported by the Asian Development Bank. But the common point of these insurance schemes, if they are not working on the indemnity model, so to try to assess what we have to compensate you for, but rather work on the basis of a parametric model. The support, or I would say the compensation, will be quickly triggered with regards to a specific event occurring. That can be, for instance, deviation from typical weather index trends in the case of agriculture, or in the case of the City Disaster Insurance Pool in Philippines, it will be triggered by the occurrence of certain extreme event. And we believe this is quite interesting, an interesting role that DFIs can play, either to contribute to this fund. For instance, in the Philippines, the first endowment was provided through a loan by the Asian development banks, or through participating to I would say, credit enhancement mechanism. Another option for, or another, instrument that we can propose as a DFI to provide quick response is the contingency loan. The contingency loan is a bit like a development policy loan, and my apologies because I'm using a lot of, let's say, novlangue or concept, very specific language of the DFI, which is not a good thing. But a development policy loan typically work on three tiers. First, it's a budgetary support, frame around a policy dialogue on certain, I would say, objectives of certain policies, and supported by technical cooperation to help the implementation of some of these measures. In the case of a contingency loan, the budgetary loan will be disbursed and quickly by the occurrence of some catastrophic event. And we use that in Madagascar jointly with the World Bank. AFD has put in place such a contingency loan that was triggered earlier this year during Madagascar flood, with the impact I've just put on the slide. And for us, it's quite important, and it's quite related to the subject, even indirectly, of how do you ensure that there is, I would say, preservation, not only opportunities, but also preservation of the existing SMMEs and jobs, and to provide quick support so that you also avoid difficult choice by the local government when it needs to rebuild the basic infrastructure that are the enabling environment of this enterprise, and to avoid to divert some resources for, I don't know, social programs or supports to certain economic activities. So it's a quickly triggered support to the state to face this catastrophic and sudden event. Another role for DFI, indeed, and this is the third and last pillar, is how, and directly related to the question, is what are the initiatives where climate, when we can link climate, I would say, positive action and economic opportunities and jobs. And here I would like to make, nexus is a word quite fashionable these days, but I would like to make the link between biodiversity, climate change, and economic opportunities. There is growing evidence, indeed, that when you protect the biodiversity and the ecosystem and the richness of the ecosystem, it provides a greater resilience in terms of adaptation of the territory, the capacity of the territory to absorb climate change impact. And it's a parenthesis, but in the sanitary crisis that we are facing, there is also the link between biodiversity and, I would say, diffusing the risk of and mitigating the risk of zoonose transmission from animals to human beings, and we see that more and more. So quite important nexus. But in this case, I want just to put an example of the ProNature project put forward by AFD in Southern Africa, in 3 countries, South Africa, Zambia, and Botswana. And the idea is to support community enterprise for them to make more sustainable use of natural resources and their, I would say, environmental ecosystems, and also support, I would say, biodiversity-centered community enterprise. So it's the idea of community-based biodiversity management. So it has a double benefit. Again, preserving biodiversity and ecosystem, you strengthen your capacity of adaptation and mitigation, and I would say attenuate the shock of certain climate change. And preserving it, you preserve an asset, being through sustainable use of natural resources or assets for instance, the tourism industry, and making, therefore, economic opportunities and jobs opportunities. Interestingly, in this program, the stimulation provided to private sector investments in communal ProNature enterprise is targeting 50% of female beneficiaries, female women entrepreneurs, I would say. I will stop there in this example. In the couple of minutes I'm left with, just with my last slide. Climate-related economic opportunities and job, another example. I was mentioning at the beginning transition risk. And we are together, ICLEI and AFD, partnering to support and facilitating a territorial low carbon and just transition in the case of Steve Tshwete local municipality in Mpumalanga, precisely in view of this transition risk of the decline of the local coal economy that still represents 40% of the gross added value of the territory. But we know it's a pillar of the economy that is meant to decline over time. ESCOM is going to shut down a number of old, the energy operator of the country, South African energy operator, is going to shut down a number of old coal fire power station. I made it. Sorry, you notice I'm not an English-speaking person. I'm French, as you can guess from my heavy accent. And hence, I would say I would come back to what the previous presenters and Teddy has mentioned, the importance of stakeholders' engagement and dialogue with the community, with local government, with other spheres of government, at the district level as well. And colleagues mentioned also what's being done on the district development model approach. And how can we support this dialogue and combine our tools as development partners to support the diversification of the economy or the transition of the local economy and the local entrepreneurship for sustainable jobs again. And here we combine applied research, skill analysis on the local workforce basin, and support to strategic planning, implementation of catalytic program. This is also in partnership and led by this part by GIZ on SMMEs and so forth. I will stop here and happy to answer more questions, and also with our colleague from Italy. Another and last example, I think I'm running out of time. Jesse, yes, yeah, I can see you saying yes, is the potential of the housing sector, often underestimated. There have been a very recent study by Habitat for Humanity, housing sector representing between 10 and 50% of GDP in most countries, and the downstream economic effect of energy efficiency intervention. From building materials, development, installation, design of the housing, to capacity building in building promoters and so forth, local building promoters. And after the Paris Agreement, France and Germany have partners to launch the program for energy efficiency in building, the PEEB program implemented by AFD and GIZ, to provide technical assistance and financial instrument to support this intervention in energy efficiency in the building and housing sector. And we believe with quite a strong inducive effect on SMMEs development and job creation in that sector. Thank you very much. Sorry for maybe overextending a bit my time, and happy to answer any question. Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you so much, Carl, and thank you for highlighting the role that development finance institutions play in managing that transition risk. And thanks for sharing your insights about what AFD is doing in terms of tailor-made financial products to support that transition. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Jeff Tooley, who's from the city of Durban, who will tell us a bit more about job creation and the link to the work that he's doing within the city. Over to you, Jeff.
Thanks, Jessie. Thank you, everyone. It's really an honor to be asked to speak here. I just need to share my screen. Carl, can I ask you to stop sharing your screen?
Oh, sure. I'm trying. I have, oops, I don't know what's happening.
Maybe if I can make a suggestion, Carl.
Yes, this is
it. Stop it. Okay, all right. Seems like it's working. All right, then over to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jessie. Right. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to talk a bit on a project that we've really excited about within eThekwini or Durban, South Africa. It's called the Sihlanzim Velo project. And without further ado, I'll just continue. Durban's climate future, higher temperatures, generally wetter, more variable rainfall, and increased storm intensity. And obviously, this is a risk of increased flooding and reduced quality. And this is what we're faced with in our city. The real challenge on the ground that we're seeing is these pictures just show it. Alien vegetation, increased growth, and solid waste are causing massive blockages on our road systems, and therefore flooding and associated damage that comes through this. And it was in 2009 that when we were developing the municipal adaptation plans, that this idea of protecting and restoring the riparian vegetation to give us this resilience within these spaces started to materialize. And so what we started to do is we said, looking at these streams, how who goes there, who works in those streams, and we found there was 8 different departments, and I've listed them there, that were going to these streams for different reasons. And this is out of the city departments, all under-resourced, all fairly low on budget. And so as a result, we were finding it was a fairly inefficient process. And the other thing that we were having is that our city was continually growing from a space point of view in terms of the metro in the area that we were governing. So we had stormwater dealing with erosion and flooding issues, parks with vegetation control, the environment branch, alien vegetation, pollution control was there, sanitation, dealing with the sewer breakages and blockages, environmental health, our vector control, dealing with rats and and mosquito breeding and our roads and stormwater maintenance that had to go and clean and repair those roads and clean the culverts that you saw earlier. So what we did is we said, you know, we've got one of the things we have in our city is a large unemployment situation. So we engaged with councillors and communities, and we started to talk to them about this idea of how could we work together as a city to improve the quality of our streams and rivers, and thereby reduce the risk of flooding, reduce the risk of blockages of the culverts that exacerbated this flooding, so that we could improve the lives of the communities, because obviously these culverts being flooded and damaged impacts on these communities. And so talking to them, and the concern we had was climate change is only going to make this situation worse. So we engaged with the communities. We explained that what we wanted to do is working with co-ops to look after portions of stream. And so as a city, we went into the community and taught the community members what would be required to set up a co-op. And once that had been done, we put out an expression of interest, which was advertised, where cooperatives were asked to respond by submitting their company documents. Those that had their documents correct, they were then obviously qualifying co-ops that responded. And we looked at those who reside within the initial project area that we had selected. And these are areas with high density, high unemployment development, or high unemployment within those areas. So because we were looking at maximizing the employment opportunities. On average, each cooperative was set up with between 5 and 8 members. And so was set up throughout the city. And really the setup that we had is we've got obviously a project manager. We had people that were assisting with the monitoring and evaluation and the health and safety and audit compliance. That was served through a consultancy. The requirement of the consultancy was to have a project leader for the 2 areas that we were working within. They then had to find assessors out of the community that were then trained up to be assessors for the quality, and also to advise the co-ops on the ground in terms of business support. And then we had about 80 co-ops, 79 to 80 co-ops that were then established and employed within these areas. Each co-op is given 5 kilometers of stream to look after. And they're contracted for a 36-month period. And essentially the tasks that they have to perform is clearing debris out of the stream. So that's your solid waste, removal of alien vegetation, and they remove 3 meters on either side from the edge of the water. They remove the alien vegetation and solid waste, as well as the solid waste and alien vegetation within the actual stream. Identified where there was minor erosion starting to occur, and some initial work to halt that or slow down that erosion. Grass and vegetation maintenance, and then litter control in those areas on the side of the stream. And they get assessed every month against a standard, and based on their standard, they then get paid. They're issued with protective clothing that they're required to have. They have tools to carry out the work that they're required to do. And then basically they were trained on business management and marketing management. There was basic training. They were trained on bookkeeping, health and safety, alien vegetation removal. Construction mentorship was given in terms of minor infrastructure implementation. What we found in terms of challenges, we found there was a challenge. We had co-ops that were in wards and that were not, there wasn't enough stream in those wards, and we couldn't use those co-ops in other wards because of political instability, illegal surcharges, illegal dumping. But what we found quite interesting, because these people from the community, there was a bit of community policing that happening, and we were seeing less dumping. And then safety of the co-ops of the site. And they've overcome that by working as a team. These are just some pictures. That was some before and after. We've got 59 co-ops working now, 472 workers. We're spending about 26 million per annum and removing the solid waste, alien vegetation, reporting sewer leaks, and we're seeing vegetable gardens coming up in these areas. I'll skip through these because of time. I just want to stress one thing. One of the things that we're seeing is these co-ops are now expanding into other areas. So we're looking at how we can close the loops. This is an eco paver that's made out of dirty plastic out of the stream, glass out of the stream, and soil. And we're finding stronger than concrete pavers. So what we're looking at is the bigger picture, and we're very excited. We've got the C40 and the CFF facility that are supporting us in developing a business case for transformative adaptation of the eThekwini rivers and streams. And we're looking at risk mitigation, green economy, the global city brand, social cohesion, and youth development. And it's quite exciting that we're starting to see this. As the numbers are starting to come out from the work of the support of the C40, we're seeing the positive impact that this is having not only on the economy, not only on the space that we're working on, but in the communities that we're working with. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jessie.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And this is a program that I work closely with Jeff on, and I'd like to just emphasize that it is really transformative when climate action can deliver jobs as well. So I think from what I've heard from the speakers today is that climate actions present an opportunity to create livelihoods and to create jobs. And we need to be really intentional about supporting projects that really highlight and support community participation and job creation. So now I would like to, before we move on to the next part of this session, I would like to thank all the speakers for sharing their insights and for voluntarily just sharing some of their own experiences with working in this field. We will now play a show reel of some great examples of how small businesses are contributing to job creation and livelihood creation, and then we will meet back into this room. So I will hand over to Kate and the team.
The European Union and South Africa are heavily impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. While immediate health concerns prevail, economic recovery packages are being prepared at national, regional, and global level. On the EU side, while all the immediate political focus is on the task of combating the coronavirus, the European Union is continuing its preparatory work on long-term policy priorities, including the European Green Deal. On the South African side, the government remains committed over the short to medium term to implementing structural economic reforms to address multiple socio-economic challenges that have been amplified by the COVID-19 pandemic.
My name is Rina Kionka, and I'm the EU ambassador to South Africa. The EU is in a difficult position, and we recognize that our partners around the world are also in a difficult position, and so we've banded together to try to help. The EU alone has rechanneled over R500 million to the most immediate problems that we see in the health sector, education, GBV. In the EU, we recognize that small and medium-sized enterprises are the backbone of the economy, and this is where the jobs come from. So as soon as the pandemic hit, we got in contact with Green Cape and the National Treasury and other green SMEs and their financial backers to learn more, to learn from what South Africa is doing, how we can support the efforts to recover in a green way.
My name is Nazim Hendricks. I'm from the Jobs Fund, a unit of National Treasury. Our aim is to co-fund and test innovative job creation models. In 2008, with the global financial crisis, there was a realization that things has to be done differently. The green economy has to play a central part in the development of the way we operate going forward. The Green Outcomes Fund Partnership is a collaboration between the Jobs Fund and Green Cape. The goal there is really to invest about 495 million into small, early stage, small and micro medium enterprises who operate within the green economy. And we feel that the collaboration between the Green Outcomes Fund, Green Cape, as well as the Jobs Fund will provide the market with an incentive to actually invest within the green economy and thereby promote further investments further down the line. We've got to take account of our carbon footprint, of our natural resources and so forth. And hence development of green economic models becomes crucial within the context of developing long-term sustainable economic growth.
My name is Luther Muller. I'm part of the management team of Waste One. In our business, as a waste management business, we specialize in developing integrated waste management plans for corporate facilities and for municipalities alike. During the COVID-19 lockdown period, we had to restructure how drivers were operating. We operate on a huge workforce within our facility, so having to put certain people on short time and having a rotation in terms of the amount of people on the facility at that particular time created havoc in terms of operational excellence. How much can we get done work-wise from a work-labor perspective? There's only 100 people per meter on the facility, which we have way more. So, I mean, that was a challenge in itself.
My name is Fabio Venturi. I'm the founder and CEO of Teramanzi Group. Teramanzi Group is an environmental consulting firm, and we help our clients gain access and participate in the green economy. Many of our projects are focused in the renewable energy field, wind, solar farms. COVID effectively shut those down. One of the major challenges was having a number of our active projects and pending projects pause indefinitely, which created severe cash flow concerns.
My name is Akshay Jagannath. I'm an operations manager for Sustainable Heating. Sustainable Heating is a heating solution company that produce heat by using waste wood. During the COVID-19 pandemic, our main challenges were our suppliers were closed, so we couldn't get wood. On our equipment side, they couldn't supply us materials where we needed to fix and repair and maintain our plants.
My name is Francisco Stennet. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Sensor Networks. We have hardware that gets installed into your home alongside your geyser, and there's a couple of sensors, and it monitors the health of the geyser. Our biggest issue that we had was that obviously with the direct lockdown we couldn't do any installations. COVID's proven to us that time waits for nobody, and businesses have seen the impact of COVID. What this has done is it's accelerated our digital footprint in South Africa.
Global challenges require global solutions. Droughts, floods, pestilence, these know no borders, nor do the effects on health and the environment. We'll eventually find a vaccine for COVID, but there's no vaccine for climate change or the destruction of biodiversity.
Over the course of the next few months, we will be on a resilience journey with 12 South African green SMMEs. The output of this project, conducted within the frames of strategic partnerships for the implementation of the Paris Agreement, will be a green recovery policy paper based on and informed by the work of the Green Outcomes Fund in helping green SMMEs retain jobs and ensure sustainability.
I'm Megan van Vlaanderen. I'm the Chief Financial Officer at GreenCap, and I'm also the project lead for the Green Outcomes Fund, which is a partnership between National Treasury's Jobs Fund and GreenCap. The process for the policy development was to include international knowledge and local knowledge around the just transition, green recovery policies that have been implemented elsewhere, and then also combine this with the 12 small businesses that we're going to follow over the next 6 months to follow what their key barriers are and how we can help them scale and grow after the pandemic. So objective of the seminars and the policy papers, we really want to have a conversation with the right people, and we want people who can actually put things into action. We had 4 breakaway groups. We looked at something that was quite important was ecosystem support. Internationally, we've got a lot of the International Cleantech Network, we've got the C40 cities clustering, then business associations as well. And we wanted to see how we can collaborate with one another and use each other's skills and knowledge as we put together this policy. Then we looked at how do we measure success? What is success? At the end of these 6 months, what were we wanting to achieve? We also looked at barriers for the SMMEs. We wanted input directly from them to see what these really are, what we can tick, what we can deal with, or what needs further conversations around getting to the outcome. GreenCap's mission is for a thriving, prosperous Africa, which is mobilized by the green economy. And we believe that green SMEs are a key part of this, and a successful green SME going forward will really form part of the green recovery process.
Winston Churchill famously said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." And so a green recovery opportunity is, in essence, a chance to make lemons into lemonade. We're about to borrow 10 trillion euros from the youth. The choices we make today on spending will affect their tomorrow. Therefore, it's incumbent upon us to make those choices in a sustainable fashion so as to lessen the burden on them.
Global solidarity, open and fair trade, and multilateralism are more important than ever. we need to join forces to define together global approaches and standards for a green recovery.
Through the Tony Elumelu Entrepreneurship Program, I am committing $100 million to support the next generation of African entrepreneurs. The program represents a decade-long commitment to support 10,000 African entrepreneurs and startups. The program is open to entrepreneurs from all 54 African countries. Over the next 10 years, our goal is to generate 1 million jobs through these 10,000 businesses. I have seen these young Africans prosper, from some who didn't even know what to do with their lives until they got the $5,000 seed capital from Tony Elumelu Foundation, and the mentorship and the training, to now having annual turnover in excess of $3 million. That gladdens my heart. That, to me, is a dream come true.
After the 12-week program, I started going to farms to carry out what I thought was now a solid business that I had developed through the Tony Elumelu Foundation. So I went to the East. So when it was time for me to go out and do a demonstration, I took the drone, and then I activated the props. And the minute it took off, the whole scene changed. And in no time, I was circled by all these villagers. And then I explained what this thing could do for them, right? And that's when the revelation came, that what we had as a concept of even what these drones could do was so limited that the villagers knew where their issues were, where their pains were. So they started sharing this. So you mean that last year when Okoro had this problem on his farm, you mean that if this thing was out, that he could actually gather, he could have seen, when the invaders came and, did stuff on his farm, the other guy. So you mean that at some point I also got them to spray, right? So I turned on the sprayer on the farm. So they said, oh, so you mean that we could have used this thing instead of carrying this heavy knapsacks that the government was giving us 2 years back? So that's how it really started, where they became our ads. So there was now word of mouth that they were now passing on the opportunities and the ideas both to us and their fellow village farmers as well. We have on the table today about 100,000 farmers that are waiting to see how we can deploy our systems that they can utilize. Today, Aerial Industries' focus is in manufacturing our own local drones. So we don't just provide the service, but we make our own drones, and then we provide these drones for the farmers.
Alors aujourd'hui, Okuméa Gabon, c'est une équipe de 11 personnes qui travaillent au quotidien pour mettre à disposition des touristes un package dynamique et personnalisable. Nous avons une valeur marchande de 23 millions de francs CFA et nous avons un impact direct social parce que 2,5% de nos bénéfices sont reversés à une association qui lutte justement contre la protection des parcs nationaux du Gabon. Aujourd'hui, Okuméa Gabon, en plus d'être une entreprise économique viable, souhaite être une entreprise responsable, capable d'aider les populations qui bénéficient de ces prestations.
I stayed in Sierra Leone because what we do was so acutely needed. For example, the role we played during the flood and landslide last year. When the disaster hit, the government and the UN and other agencies, they needed to see quickly where there were issues and where there was further risk to life. What you would usually have had done is to send people in there on foot, and this is during a time where it's rainy, there's a lot, the ground is treacherous. So our solution was timely in that we could send our drones at a far distance into the danger zone, get the information that they needed, and they'll be able to advise on how they should respond to the emergencies.
My name is Steven Jiunjira. I'm the founder and executive director of Our World International. This is a waste management non-profit organization. And I just decided to start this organization to create more opportunities from the waste, something which was regarded as useless, and just turn it into something useful.
The name of the city is derived from the name of the river, Longway, and it passes through right in the middle of the city. And historically, is a very important river because it is the river that ecosystemically supports the city.
There is a direct link between waste and composting. The biodegradable waste can decompose and then turn into soil or compost, and so which can be used it can be used as fertilizer. And you know, Malawi is agro-based economy, and so a lot of people rely heavily on fertilizer. And with the economic hardship we're going through, I guess this is just the perfect solution to a lot of farmers and a lot of people.
So this is a demonstration that you can make organic manure from waste. And if they do that, then we'll be keeping our rivers clean, our city clean, and our country clean, thereby making the whole world clean.
A picture is worth 1,000 words, and we want to make it more interesting and get these people to be a part of the project so we can share the message right across the globe. We would like people to be educated and trained how they can manage waste on their own.
This project is very important. It was supposed to have been done yesterday.
Well, I think the main highlight for the project has been the photo voice. This is something that I've done it for the first time, and it's really been great, and a lot of people loved it. It's been a tool that has provided us with a lot of mechanism to get feedback from the people, and also made us to imagine a lot of things, and it's given us a whole lot of other ideas about the project.
Thank you very much for those videos. Unfortunately, we didn't get an opportunity to take questions from the floor, but we've made note of those questions, and the ICLE team will get back to you with some of the answers. I think this just speaks to the level of experience that was in the room. There was so much information to share from the presenters that we didn't really get a chance to get into the questions, but it's not all lost. We will try to get back to you with some answers. I would really like to thank Teddy, Sean, Salim, Carl, and Jeff for sharing their experiences and point of view, and for all of you for attending and engaging with us in this discussion. On behalf of the Congress organizers, which is ICLE Africa, and our presenters, thank you so much for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining, and go well.